Once again, welcome back to the program. ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਰੈਬੀ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਬਲੂਮਨ ਨਾਲ। ਇਹ ਕਾਂਗਰੀਗੇਸ਼ਨ ਬੈਥ ਇਜ਼ਰਾਈਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਜੂਇਸ਼ ਫੇਥ ਦੇ ਕੀ ਸਿਧਾਂਤ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਫੈਸਟੀਵਲ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਹਨੂਕਾ। ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਆਓ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਆ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਬਲੂਮਨ ਤੋਂ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ।
Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit about yourself since when are you rabbi?
So I became a rabbi in 2009. I went to a school called American Jewish University in Los Angeles.
Right.
And for the last 4 years, I've been working there as a rabbi. And recently, I have moved back to Vancouver. And I started working with Congregation Beth Israel in August of this year.
Okay. So to become a rabbi, what all is required?
Oh, great question. So it's a much more difficult answer than you may think. There are different movements in Judaism. So
Right.
the three biggest in North America, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. And each of them have their own different requirements. I'm a conservative rabbi.
Okay.
And it says nothing about politics.
Right.
It just talks about religion. And for our program, after your undergraduate degrees, a degree I should say, you study for 5 years approximately
Okay.
at a rabbinical school, either in Los Angeles, where I went, American Jewish University, or in New York, Jewish Theological Seminary. There's a program in Israel, and just yesterday they opened up a program in Berlin.
Okay. So when you talk about reformist and conservative and an orthodox, if
Yeah.
you could just give us a brief difference between all three.
Well, it's a good question. They differ in participation of women in services.
Okay.
They differ in theology. What's interesting, though, while they're all the same, is if you're a Reformed Jew or an Orthodox Jew or a conservative Jew, you're still considered Jewish, one way or the other. So in Reform and conservative synagogues, for the most part, they are egalitarian, so men and women have equal rights, equal religious rights.
Okay.
Whereas in Orthodox, men and women sit separately, and only men are called up to say to read from the Torah or to have religious obligations, I guess you would say.
Okay.
And then questions about theology is questions about who wrote the Torah, and that's
Right.
like whole conversation to have for many hours of who wrote the Torah. Some groups believing that it was God who wrote the Torah. Well, God spoke it and Moses wrote it down.
Right.
Whereas other groups will say, no, that's not the case. It was written down over the centuries. So across the board, there's always disagreement. So there's a joke in Judaism, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. and so, right.
So different opinions and different thoughts, but basically, as you said, Torah is the holy book which everyone believes in, whether whatever, he might be a reformist or maybe a conservative or an orthodox.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The Torah is the central book of the Jewish people.
Right.
And then also what comes after it as well. Judaism is always evolving, and we call the Torah the written Torah, and there's also something called the oral Torah as well. The oral Torah is, today's actually written down, even though it's called oral. It's what we probably call the Mishnah, and then the Talmud. Mishnah was finished around 220, the Common Era, and then the Talmud was still being written in 500 and 600 as well, the Common Era. And
Right.
And so these are the books that we use today as
Right.
well. And there are more writings happening still today.
Okay.
But our job as Jews is trying to figure out what is God's will and what does God want us to do,
Okay.
and how to behave properly.
Right.
And we all have different opinions, but when it comes down to it, the Torah is our central book, and also the oral tradition as well is primarily what we look at today. We're considered today as rabbinic Jews, not
Okay.
as Torah Jews, rabbinic Jews.
Okay.
And the rabbis are the ones who it's their interpretation of God's will written down in the Mishnah and in the Talmud as well.
Okay. So that's quite extensive what you have talked. So for a layman, what are the basic principles of Judaism?
Basic principles: belief in one God.
Okay.
That's across the board. Belief in one God is important. There are also 613 commandments.
Okay.
Mitzvot in Hebrew, and these can be found in the Torah. And the question is, do you observe them or not? And different movements will say different things. When we call someone who's an observant Jew, they are people who observe these mitzvot. Not all of them, of commandments, I should say in English, not all of them can be observed because some of them have to do with the temple. The temple was destroyed in the year 70. And so since then, we've not had a temple. And Judaism evolved from then. It used to be a religion based on sacrifices. Now it's based on prayer. Okay. And that's how we worship God.
Right.
And so the question is, do you observe them or not? But they're still there. Some look at them as commandments from God. Some look at them as more of guidelines. And again, I said it depends on the authorship of the Torah and do you think it has authority or not? That's another question. So it's hard to answer that question of what are the basic beliefs because there are so many different understandings.
Right.
But across the board, as I said, Torah is the center of the Jewish people.
Right.
There is, as I said, Jewish people. Jews live all around the world, but we're still considered a people. And then today, I would also say the belief in the land of Israel, supporting Israel is very important for the majority of Jews of the world. And I think those are I guess I would say the fundamentals.
So coming back to a belief in one God,
yes, please.
Who's the creator of this world.
Right.
Now, as you said, there are different interpretations, and you talked about 613 commandments. So what are these basic commandments? Are they the way to live, or are they how to pray, or how to observe some rituals and ceremonies? What is it all about?
Everything you said.
Okay.
My understanding of the 613 mitzvot, or commandments, is that's God's will. Okay. That's what God wants us to do. And the question is, how do we perform them? So a lot of Judaism is based on doing things.
Right.
So, for example, we have dietary laws, kosher, right? There's certain things we can eat and certain things we cannot eat.
Right.
And those are laid out in the Torah.
Okay.
Observing the Sabbath as a day of rest.
Right.
That's also in the Torah. But you have other mitzvot that are about how to treat each other. Not just how we're supposed to behave in the world, but how we're treating each other kindly, respecting the elderly, respecting your parents.
Right. That's
also mentioned. These are all considered commandments as well. And we're going to talk shortly about Hanukkah. There are certain things you can do on different holidays.
Okay.
Certain things you can't do. Sometimes you can work, sometimes you can't work.
Right.
And we'll talk later, I guess, about Hanukkah and
Absolutely.
the laws and
so various facets of life are covered in these 613 commandments.
Right. The Torah is a values book.
Okay.
It teaches how to live in this world.
Right.
And that's what God's will is, in my understanding at least, that it's based on what God wants us to behave as good human beings and as observant Jews. And that's what's there.
And as you said in the beginning only about reformist Jews and conservative Jews, so in the Torah there is nothing of this kind which is written that somebody has to be a reformist or a conservative.
No.
It's your own opinions which you create and then you start following the religion in your own way.
Well, that's a modern way of looking at it, I would say. The concept of Orthodox Reform and Orthodox Reform and Conservative is very new in the grand scheme of things. It's not until the modern era these movements come out of Germany.
Right.
Has there been a divide in Judaism? Of course, like in any group, there's always different opinions.
Right.
And probably from the beginning of Judaism, there was always disagreements.
Right.
There was always an agreement that everyone's considered a Jew, but the way to be a Jew was always discussed. And the way we have Judaism today is in these divides and these different movements or denominations.
Right. Is there a need to have a middleman between God and the common person?
Not at all.
Okay.
So, excuse me. The rabbi, which I am, rabbi is a spiritual leader, but when you pray to God, you're praying directly to God.
Right.
The rabbi does not, or the cantor who leads in music, does not intercede on behalf of, let's say, an individual.
Right.
We pray directly to God.
Okay. And when we talk about Moses, what is his position?
So Moses is the great leader.
Right.
A lot of times in Hebrews refer to as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher.
Okay.
And it's the 5 books of Moses. And Moses is a prophet, probably the most important prophet of the Jewish people.
Okay.
And our belief is that Moses spoke with God as well.
Right.
But Moses is not a being that we worship, for example.
Okay.
Moses spoke to God, and Moses told the people what God had to say.
Okay, that's wonderful. We'll continue with the discussion. We'll go for a small break, come back and learn more about your religion and also the various festivals and holidays, what you were talking about, and especially Hanukkah. We'll come after this break.
Great.
ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਜੋ ਰਾਬੀ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਬਲੂਮਨ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜੁਡਾਇਜ਼ਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਧਰਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਰੱਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਲੀਵ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਮਿਡਲ ਮੈਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਾਬੀਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਪਿਰਿਚੁਅਲ ਲੀਡਰਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਮੋਜ਼ਸ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਟੌਪ ਦਾ ਲੀਡਰ ਸੀ, ਸਪਿਰਿਚੁਅਲ ਲੀਡਰ, ਜਿਸ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਰਾਹ ਦੱਸਿਆ। 613 ਕਮਾਂਡਮੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਵੱਖਰੀ ਫੇਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਜੀਣਾ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਲੀਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਤੋਰਾ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਜੀ ਇਸ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ਅੱਜ ਜੁਡਾਇਜ਼ਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨੇ ਰਬਾਈ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਬਲੂਮਨ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਧਰਮ ਦੇ ਕੀ ਸਿਧਾਂਤ ਨੇ, ਕਿਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਆਓ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਤਿਉਹਾਰ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਬਿਲੀਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। Once again, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, while we were talking before the break that you gave us the basic fundamentals of Judaism, I would like to know a little bit about the youth especially, because in other organized religions we are finding that youngsters are going away from organized religion and they are believing more in spirituality. What's the condition as far as Judaism is concerned or Jews are concerned?
I think Jews are very similar as well. One of my roles at the synagogue I work at is bringing Jewish youth into the synagogue, into realizing what Judaism has to offer for them.
Right.
My title at the synagogue is Director of Youth Engagement.
Okay.
So I'm in charge of many different aspects coming with the youth.
Right.
One of my major roles is being in charge of United Synagogue Youth, USY, which is a youth group for really starts in grades 4 in our synagogue through grades 12. And so we do social activities, and we do some religious activities such as a Friday night dinner, Shabbat meal, or coming to services, helping lead the services, trying to bring the youth into our synagogue as much as possible to demonstrate to them there's something here for them, community, religion, social aspects as well.
Okay, and in a synagogue, that's your place of worship. In a synagogue, like a church where there is an idol of Christ, or and other places of worship of the Hindus, there are deities. In the Sikhs, they have the Guru Granth Sahib. So in the synagogue, what do you worship to? Is it the Torah which is placed in the center, or what is it?
So we don't worship anything except God.
Okay.
So there's no idols. You'll see no iconography in the synagogue whatsoever. There is a Torah that's in an ark, which we take out to read from, but we never worship it. Now the ark is usually placed on the eastern wall, and because the temple that stood is in the east. It's in today's the Western Wall. We're in Jerusalem, and so Jews always face the Western Wall. Will face where the temple used to stand. That was because at one point that's where the Holy of Holies was, and the sanctuary, and that's where the sacrifices were done.
Okay.
And so we face that, but we are worshiping God, and belief is God is everywhere, not just in one location.
Okay. Now coming back to the basic festivals and the holidays which you believe in, Hanukkah is a very important. What is it?
So first of all, Hanukkah is not very important at all.
Okay.
So it's one of the minor holidays in Judaism. Judaism has lots of holidays.
Okay.
Probably the most important being Yom Kippur.
Okay.
The Day of Atonement, which happens earlier this year, and it happened in, I believe in September, and Rosh Hashanah is our new year, and it's Yom Kippur. Hanukkah, on the other hand, is very minor.
Okay. But I was under the impression it's a very major festival, nevertheless.
It's actually, it has become very major because of the time of the year.
Okay.
Because of Christmas.
Okay.
Hanukkah is seen as the equivalent of Christmas. Christmas, but to the best of my understanding, it's a very important holiday for Christians.
Right.
For Judaism, on the other hand, Hanukkah is a very minor holiday.
Okay. So what does it mean and what does it signify?
Okay, so give me 1 second to explain why it's considered minor.
Sure.
On a major holiday in Judaism, such as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, even the Sabbath that happens every week, observant Jews do not work.
Okay.
And they have a lot of restrictions. Whereas in Hanukkah, you can go to work. There are no restrictions on what you can and cannot do. So some of the customs that we do on Hanukkah, every night of Hanukkah, we light the Hanukkah candelabra. Some people call it menorah, but actually the proper reference to it is a Chanukiah. Chanukiah is a special Hanukkah menorah. It has on it 8 spots, 8 holders for candles, and one extra what we call the shamash, which is the helper, the candle that lights all the other candles. So on any Chanukiah, you'll see 9 spots. For candles, like that every night, and then it's time for family to gather together. There's special foods that we eat. There are something called latkes, which are fried potato pancakes. Also, there's a donut called sufganiyot, which is jam-filled donuts, and also both of them have to do with oil, because oil is very important in Hanukkah. And the historical story and the miracles behind Hanukkah have to do with oil. So let me explain a little bit. So in the 2nd century, before the Common Era, Judaism, we say BCE, not BC, because BC implies before Christ, when we don't believe that Jesus was Christ. So we could say before the Common Era, BCE. And so in the 2nd century, there was a revolt. The Maccabees revolted against the rulers, Antiochus, who was an Assyrian Greek, Seleucid Empire, and they were revolting because they couldn't practice Judaism, and they wanted to be able to practice their own religion. And so they won that revolt. It was a small army that fought off a large army. So that's one miracle. The second miracle is when the Jews returned to Jerusalem and got the temple back, because the backstory is that the temple was defiled. They brought in statues of Zeus, slaughtered pigs, things that are forbidden under Jewish law. And when they came back, they had to light this menorah. A menorah was the eternal light. It was always lit in the temple, and they found a little bit of oil, and there's enough for one day. It lasted for 8 days. And so that's another miracle. And so that's where the oil comes from. And so we have fried potato latkes that are in olive oil, or any other oil really, and sufganiyot, fried jelly-filled donuts. And that's where that custom comes from. And then one other custom, we have a dreidel. There's a little top that we spin. It has 4 Hebrew letters on it, standing for a great miracle happened there, and that's what it would say in outside the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, it would say a great miracle happened here.
So basically, you believe in miracles.
Yes, I mean it's.
What kind of miracles, basically? Like you're talking about these things. So, like in today's life, what kind of miracles do you believe in?
Okay, so if you're asking me personally or the Jewish people, I can't speak for this for the Jewish people. I can speak for myself only. So I believe in miracles of life. I think that a child being born, that's definitely a miracle. I'm a new father. My daughter is going to be turning 1 in a couple weeks, and less than a couple weeks. And for me, that was a huge miracle in my life, having her, and just watching her grow up every single step of her life. For me, that's a miracle. A miracle is that the sun rises every morning, that we're alive and we're here today. That's definitely a miracle that I see in life. And then there's also like miracles that I believe in that happened many years ago as well. But when I think about miracles, I think about what you were mentioning, modern day miracles.
So now, whatever we have talked so far, in this it seems that there's one God who's the creator of this universe. We all are children of God, and we should live over here happily with each other. We should integrate and understand each other. So as far as the Judaism is concerned, how are you trying to spread this message of integration to other communities also? Is some work done on this particular aspect also?
I mean, I think that I'm not involved with it myself, but there are organizations that do interfaith work as well. And I think that's very important. I mean, even though I'm not involved with it, I do support it, because I think that it's very important for other cultures to know about other cultures. And we are all members of the world. And we are all citizens here in Canada, especially. We live in a multicultural society. And I think that's very important that we spread each other's message to each other, not to convert other people, but so that we know about other people. With education, that's the best thing for peace, and also for living a life together, where we work together and are friendly with each other.
Wonderful. So this year Hanukkah is being celebrated on November the 27th. We wish you best of luck. You enjoy and celebrate and spread this message of oneness and love amongst all. Towards the end, what would be a message to our viewers today who are watching this program to understand more about Judaism? And also, one before I let you go, another question is: we find that Jews are very wise businessmen. They have wherever they have gone, they have flourished, and as a community, they have been successful quite a lot. What's the reason behind that?
Well, I think that's a generalization. I think that some Jews are very successful, and we hear about that. But there are some Jews who are not as well. I think there's no difference between a Jew and a non-Jew when it comes to business practices or intelligence. It's just that's what we hear in the news, and it's interesting because Jews are a very small minority, and the attention that Jews get in the press makes it seem like the Jews are a much bigger number. I can't tell you the stats of how many Jews there are because I didn't bring that with me. But it's a very small minority. So I don't think there's any secret to the success of Jews because I don't think it's only Jews. I think that some Jews are very successful and some are not.
And lastly, one more question has come to mind. To go to a church while there is one person on the roadside who needs help, what would you think God wants? To go to the synagogue and pray there, or to help a person who is requiring some help?
Both.
Okay.
I think that it's very important. There's a concept in Judaism called tikkun olam, repairing the world, and we're partners with God. And the belief is that the world's not perfect, and it's our job to help create something better. And so we have an obligation to those who are needy as well. So I'll give you one example. I'm in charge of our school, our Hebrew school, and next week, this Sunday coming up, we're doing a food drive. We're trying to collect food, and Jews are responsible for other Jews and also for the fellow citizens as well who are not Jews. So that's why you'll see, for example, what happened in the Philippines. The Jewish federations across North America collected $1 million. Israel has brought in their team to set up hospitals, field hospitals, to help the people, because we feel that as Jews that we are citizens of the world, and we also have an obligation to help other people.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time. Thank you. ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਰਬਾਈ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਬਲੂਮਨ ਨਾਲ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਧਰਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਧਰਮ ਦੇ ਕੀ ਸਿਧਾਂਤ ਨੇ, ਕਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ 'ਚ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਅਖੀਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨਸ ਆਫ ਦ ਵਰਲਡ ਹਾਂ, ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਜੋ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ, ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਫਿਲੀਪੀਨਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਜੋ ਹਾਦਸਾ ਵਾਪਰਿਆ ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਟਾਈਫੂਨ ਆਇਆ, ਉਸ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਮਿਸ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਊਜ਼ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਅਮੀਰ ਹਨ ਜਾਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਬੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸਪੈਰਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਬੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਨ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਉਸੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਓ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਲ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਬਣਾਈਏ। ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ। ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਲਈ 604 603 7555 ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਈਮੇਲ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ harpreetsingh@gmail.com। ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦੇਣਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹੋਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈਏ। ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਦੇ ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ਰਸ ਦੇ, ਅਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸਪਾਂਸਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ਮੈਂਟ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਕਰੋ। ਫਿਰ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਤਦ ਤੱਕ ਗੁੱਡ ਬਾਏ।